Hey, Nation, going around the horn. And we're back with Joshua Liberman out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Joshua, how you doing? You keeping it clean and safe and happy down there?
Well, we're safe, and I'm always clean. Yeah, OCD
uh,
is my wife says. I just think I'm precise. Things are good.
okay. Okay. So you have an acronym for us. We titled this segment GYST,
Yeah.
and you've done some work in the area. So, in fact, you know what? You, sir, are going to be able to help me initiate the talking stick. I went and found a talking stick. We're number one.
Wow.
So, sir, there's the talking stick. You have the talking stick.
We used that at the debates the other night.
Yeah.
So the what has come up recently is that I'm sure everybody's heard the buzz phrase digital transformation, and everybody wants to talk about that. And I get frustrated quickly with buzz phrases, whether they're trusted advisor, digital transformation, or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily, at least in the latter case, have a distinct meaning. So in reality, what the digital transformation has been for us is really just getting things in gear, executing on all the things we've asked or presented to our clients over the last few years, whether it's work from home or from anywhere, or shoring up security, or work teaching them to use things like Slack and Teams, or even voice over IP phones. And I have a funny story about that, but I'll come back to it. The acronym GYST is for getting your shift together. Notice the
I've heard a variation of that, but we have women
yes.
and children on the line. So go ahead.
Well, they're always first. So really what it is it's getting people to actually execute all the things we've been trying to push them through these doorways, and suddenly they're opening the door and walking through on their own. So they're asking us to implement exactly what we've been trying to get them to pay attention to for some time. And the thing with the VoIP phones that was so funny is that I'd had a client that we've presented VoIP to 4 times in 2 years, and they had called one of my texts, then they talked to one of my other texts, and they got transferred to me, and we talked, and he said, so you guys are in the office? And I said, no, I am actually, but everybody else is working remotely. And he was shocked. He said, oh, how did I said, they're voice over IP phones. That's how it works. They have one on their desk, they have one on their home, and it just works that way. As a matter of fact, it works on their cell phones.
Yeah.
And he was just shocked. And I said, it's funny because this is just what we've been trying to express to you. And his question was basically, how the hell can I make things work when nobody's in the office? A little more specific than that. And there's a lot of answers, but a lot of it has to do with communications. So it was a discussion about VoIP phones and Teams and how to effectively use scheduling. It was interesting that these 2 years, 4 or 5 meetings, none of that sunk in. And maybe it's me, maybe it's not them, maybe I'm just not communicating well, but none of it sank in and sunk in. And then all of a sudden he was interested. So we're actually going to meet next week about that. There's this change, this shift,
Yeah.
if you will. And I think that it's really just getting people's attention suddenly. So that discussion was something I had with Channel Pro. That discussion was a podcast yesterday for CompTIA, but I'm
Okay.
actually at the end of that discussion, we ended with a talk about how security has morphed along with this and how different security is. And if I can get a little arcane, anybody there who's on the call who's studied college level physics understands that there's quantum and then there's classical mechanics. Classical is the stuff you learn in high school with a nice picture of the atom, with nucleus and then the electrons circling that, their nice little orbits, exactly where they are, yada, yada, yada. They look cool, kind of like the logo right here, right here.
Yeah.
But
Hey,
in
amen.
reality, that's not the world we're in. We're in we're in a quantum mechanical world where probabilities, or what's known as a probability cloud, identify where things are. And my point is that we've moved away from a very defined, very classical physics visualization of how our networks are protected. We had a perimeter, we had a firewall, we had Wi-Fi, we had some remote users limited through controlled connectivity. The rest of them were in the office, they were connected to a premise machine or cloud services, but it was all very known, all very predictable. Now we have people working from literally anywhere, connecting in a large variety of new ways from a large variety of new and frequently unknown remote devices. It's become much more quantum mechanical, and the way we deal with their security is changing. For me,
Yeah.
it's the difference between thinking of protecting endpoints and devices and maybe also applications to protecting pathways. We're now protecting methodologies and pathways, and I'm trying to rejigger our whole approach to this. We won't jettison the concept of EDR or what people used to call AV. We certainly won't jettison firewalls. We won't jettison a lot of what we did, but it's just not adequate anymore. If you look at what you could do from the standpoint of protecting an endpoint, there's probably 3,000 or 4,000 vendors that provide one type of protection or another, if you include things like DNS filtering and anti-spam and all this other stuff. And that's too much to juggle. And you can still miss things. Even our own security stack has up to 12 players in it with up to 16 services. It's becoming unmanageable. So I'm trying to reimagine this and turn it into a protection of pathways and transit and traffic rather than a protection of endpoint or services. And mixed up with all that is cloud security, because very few of us really can do very much about the innate security of our cloud service providers. But we can do things like become aware of trouble, getting alerts from things like O365 when there's out of geo login attempts or multiple failures, getting alerts when people fail to connect by remote access, and so forth. So this is all part of that long talk. But
No, yeah, it's really good.
It's going to keep me busy for the rest of the year at least, probably next year.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm going to make it that we're going to do part 2 on this topic next month, okay? Because there's a lot there that you kind of laid out the overview, but here's where I can make a contribution before we go in terms of the overused term. You're probably going to throw that talking stick and whack me. Paradigm shift. There's another term. But Josh, for example, my research in recent times, and maybe you've seen it fly by, I've been doing some work in the third-party maintenance area, some analysis. So basically buying extended warranties for hardware, much like you might for your car. Very simple.
Sure.
With the new, another term that you're probably tired of, but I'm full of those today. But what my research showed, and where I'm spending some time is and your client may finally listen to this conversation, is, hey, instead of buying a whole new fleet of laptops, I understand we're at 36 months, and I understand the accountant said, we've fully depreciated the fleet of laptops. Why don't we take on an extended warranty or third-party maintenance and try and juice this thing out for another 24 months, because we're trying to minimize our expenses in the pandemic recession, aka cash is king. And that's why we're seeing an uptick in the sale of these services. They've been around forever, Joshua. It's just the conversation's changing about that. To your point, everything's on the table, and we're just seeing different. Does that make sense? I could go on, but I think I made my point.
And while you were speaking, somebody was trying to reach me about my car's extended warranty. So I certainly know what you're talking about. And I doubt there's an American with a cell phone that doesn't know something about what you're talking about. Yes,
Yeah.
although I realize I've trivialized it and I don't mean to. Everybody is under warranty one way or another. In my mind, they're either warranted by the manufacturer, or what you're talking about, or they're self-insuring. They're doing it themselves. And a lot of people, I don't believe we have a site, with a single exception on a very large, expensive SAN. I don't believe we have anybody that looks at doing anything beyond the initial 3 years.
Yep.
They look at it, well, when I get them to pay attention and think about it, they just take that gamble. But the problem is there's much more to replacing a machine than buying a machine. And I know we have clients that want to buy $500 machines. We don't work with those folks. Our lowest end machine is $1,000. And it lasts 5, 6, 7 years, unfortunately, or we found out last week, 14 years sometimes. And the problem, though, is that that $999 machine needs several $100s of integration sometimes, or at least a couple hundred, to get it on the network, migrate everything we need to, reinstall the apps, get up, everything we do.
Right.
So what you're talking about has two appeals. One is, of course, preservation of cash, but it also preserves frustration, because a lot of times when we replace a 4-year-old machine, the new machine isn't notably quicker anymore. 20 years ago, a 4-year-old machine, there was generations of improvements across the whole machine. Nowadays, a 4-year-old machine might still be a Core i5 with 8 gig of memory and an SSD. Maybe it won't be NVMe, so maybe it'll be that. But it's not this huge leap anymore. So it's harder to justify it. And if I could find a way to get people to pay for those extended warranties and for me to benefit from that. So I would ask you, I know what the end user gets from putting a 2-year warranty on a 3-year-old machine. What does the MSP get? And I don't mean $20. I mean, we still have to support an older machine. So how do we benefit from supporting an older machine that will undoubtedly generate more tickets? What's in it for us?
Yeah, well, customer service at a certain level, there is a revenue component. So all the major distributors offer a third-party maintenance package, and that's actually a really important point, because there are some private equity-backed TPM firms that have a reputation for then taking your client, right? And a disty will never take your client. So I'll just leave that hanging out there. But Joshua, I think it comes back to the word you don't like of trusted business advisor. For me, it's as much a conversation about my business ethics and customer care as it is the bits and bytes, right? And then the financial conversation we've already had. So that's all I've got on that topic, right? I understand it can increase. What's that?
I don't mean to write it off. And it doesn't have to have hard benefit, because soft benefit, improving the relationship, matters too. My concern is that I don't want to undercut the years, and I mean maybe decades, we've spent, many of us as MSPs, trying to push people to build replacement cycles and swap machines.
I agree.
And I don't want to increase our ticket load. Now, I'll admit that that's not a given, and you can't say.
No, but it's a really good point.
It's a balance I have to find. So maybe we never lead with this idea, but we always talk about, and for times when you can't, work with your regular replacement cycle, let's look at insurance to mitigate your risk for not doing so.
Well, and I'll end on this. In all fairness, the conversation's been about new in business models and changing business models at the high level. And with the TPM, in all fairness, it tends to be at the mid-market or higher, right? So if you're a data center on the Columbia River, that's a very important conversation for a company trying to preserve cash. And Joshua, they're going to have a highly aggressive SLA, right, to stay up and running and that kind of thing. For the bakery that bought the laptop off Amazon, on the shopping cart, click the extended coverage. Same thing.
All right, I understand where you're coming from with it.
All right, my friend, we're gonna double click a layer deeper. Keep up the good work. This is really good. I'm glad you're gonna make it a content focus over the next few months, and we're along for the ride.
We're also I have a deadline coming up Sunday for an article for Channel Pro, and it's going to be about the second half of that discussion about the shift in security mindset. With all due respect to Robert M. Persig, I think we're going to call it Zen in the Art of IT Security, and how that's changed.
Yeah, kids won't get that, but that's
all right.
That's
all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, wash your hands. Thanks, Joshua.
Sure. Bye-bye.